Hello, everyone. Welcome to Stressless Success. And I'm here with Win Morgan. Win and I just met a few months ago, although we've been kind of operating in the same circles, same community for years, probably. So it's kind of a wonder that we didn't know each other. Win, do you want to introduce yourself? And I'll introduce myself, and then we'll talk a little bit about why we're here.
Sure. Well, it's good to be here, first of all. A bit about me. It's really interesting when I was noticing who was saying yes to coming that are my contacts on LinkedIn, and welcome if you're here. I can see one or two messages already. Hi, Lorna. Some people I've probably not seen in over a dozen years, and a few of them maybe 20 years. But a very quick introduction. In my corporate life after leaving university, I went straight into sales. I'm not going to go back to the dinosaurs, even though I'm going back 30 years now. Not
Yeah.
65 million, you'd be glad to know. The short version is a few years in sales, then in consumer goods with PepsiCo here in the UK, the United Kingdom, the Frito-Lay business here in the UK. 5 years there. And at that time when I was in sales and in what was then known as category development, I went on training courses and I thought that looks like fun.
Mm.
And then in 1999, I got an offer to join another consumer goods business, United Biscuits, that offered me a job to head up the training department in one of the divisions. So I did that for 2 years, and then I've been delivering training and coaching to businesses since 2001. So 21 years ago, which makes me feel
You're getting old, Win.
I know. And earlier
And I
on,
think I'm ahead of you
confession,
in the age department. So
full confession, I trimmed my beard earlier on, and I look a bit younger than I would have done an hour and a half ago because a lot of the whites disappeared that
you
were off
got some of the gray
beard.
stuff out of there. Yeah, that's
Well,
cool.
I bypassed gray. I went straight from black to white.
Yeah, nice. So I have a similar path in that I spent almost 30 years in the corporate world before going out on my own as a coach in 2016. But I never had any experience like delivering training other than kind of the one-off thing where you had to do something for your team and you had to pretend you knew what you were doing. I started out as a stressed out, overachieving lawyer. And just, this is the early 90s when I came out of law school and just really struggled with this idea of stress and managing stress and how to do that and how to just kind of how to make my way through the world and through my professional life. And I found some things that for a while appeared to work and kind of took the edge off my stress. But it wasn't till I came across I came across Michael Neal indirectly because he was studying he studied with a spiritual teacher, a man named Peter Fenner, the year before I did, and he enjoyed that course. The course was called Radiant Mind. Peter Fenner had a book called Radiant Mind. It was kind of a westernized version of Tibetan Buddhism. And he enjoyed the course so much that he sent his publisher, his agent, basically, Robert Kirby, through it. And so Robert and I went through the class together, and Robert and I were talking, and he told me about Michael, and then one thing leads to another, and at some point I'm studying with Jack Pransky, and you're studying with George Pransky, and somehow your path and my path didn't cross until just a few months ago. I mean, I kind of knew who you were. You've got a Facebook group for coaches that's really cool and all of that. But yeah, like, and now here we are, and I came to you with this idea of like, there's this thing called LinkedIn that sounds kind of cool. You want to try something, and when you're all, yeah, sure, let's try it. And so, like, talking about having stress versus believing that it's real. We agreed on the date a couple weeks ago, and I sent out an invitation, having no idea how to do the technical piece of this. And it was more involved than I thought. Like I thought for a while, I was like, oh, we may have to like pull back the invite because I'm not sure this is going to work. And there were a few things that popped up in my mind, like, what are people going to think of me? I'm going to look like an idiot. It's going to be embarrassing. Like all those things happen.
Mm.
But the truth for me now is I'm a lot more likely to just let them pass. They don't stick. They don't seem real or as real as they did before. And you asked me a really interesting question. And I'll let you expound on it, which is, well, I can't remember whether you said, do you know what stress is, or do you know where your stress comes from? It was one of those things. But I think that's what we're pointing at. And if you want to expound on that.
Sure. Now, my life has not been one of someone who would struggle with stress. My habit was depression,
Mm,
but it would have the same impact on me. It would mean that I'd be frequently insecure,
mm-hmm.
often depressed to the stage where getting up in the morning was a challenge. And I've started talking more and more about it in the last, couple of years, but even in the couple of months, I've noticed that I'm talking more about it. And to me, it's the same thing. What's behind the scenes of causing me to have bouts of depression and bouts of insecurity would be the same as you or anyone else having a bout of stress.
Right.
But even as I'm saying that out loud, I mean, I noticed that I can get stressed in a heartbeat. I've got a quick story. And hello to Ernie, hello to Kevin as well as Lorna. Nice to see you here. Hi, Coney.
Cornelia, hello. Yeah.
Yeah, good to see you, Coney. Well, can't see you, but we know you're
Yeah.
here.
Wish we could.
And it was a week last Monday. Now, my Mondays, I normally do Mondays quite sensibly, which is I do not normally have a call before 11 a.m. on a Monday. I ease myself into the week. But this Monday, because of how busy my June is, I did not have the chance to do that. And I had my first call at 9:30, which is still kind of a late start compared to my often 6:30 or 8 a.m., depending on where I am in the world by the power of Zoom. But this morning on this Monday I woke up 7:05 with the alarm. Hi, Andrea.
Hello, Andrea. Good to see you here.
And by 7:07, and this, remember, is still an hour and 20, 2 hours and 20 before my first call, I was so wound up in my head.
Yeah.
Really going not nuts, right? But I was like tense. I was tense. And this is what I had going in my mind in those first 2 minutes. Oh my Lord, I'm starting at least 2 hours earlier. I have got 7 meetings today. That's probably 4 more than my normal Monday. That's just a regular, that's my Tuesday, Wednesday to Thursday is 7. And I need to listen to 4 of my mentee coaches, listen to them coach their people so I can give feedback on it. And I've got all of those meetings today, right? And I was going crazy with this. Now, to your point, by 7:09, 2 minutes later, I was totally calm again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, whoops, fooled me.
Yeah. Again.
Yeah.
And here's what I remember happening. I went, wait a minute. I don't have to do all of that now. I'm in bed at 7:07, pushing 7:08. The only thing I need to do is get my butt out of bed, put the coffee on. It's the only thing I need to do right now. Now, okay, I need to walk downstairs in the meantime, right? But those were the steps. Get up, make coffee.
Yeah. Not too challenging. Yeah.
One thing at a time. But
yeah,
because I'm human, it all stacked up in my mind that I had to do everything right now. And I was feeling the effects of doing everything in the day right now when I hadn't even crawled from under the duvet.
Right. Right. It's amazing how often we do that. How often we get into this, this review of our list, right? I've got this, and this to do. How am I going to do that? Which thing should I do first? What, how do I prioritize? How do I even decide? And that's a really good sign that we're just up in our head. It's a really good sign we've kind of gone off the rails a little bit. We've gotten fooled that our thinking is real, that we actually have to do something about it. We have to manage it, as opposed to, oh, if I just wait a minute, it's going to be different. It's likely going to settle, because that's what thinking tends to do. And whoops, I did that accidentally. Hang on. There's a way to show comments, but it's already being shown. I'm in a separate application, so I'm not looking directly at the LinkedIn screen, just as an aside, but I can see your comments. So our thinking tends to settle. And once it does, it typically becomes really clear what we need to do next, which in your case was go downstairs, make coffee. A lot simpler than, oh my God, I've got 12 things to do today. I've got 4 mentees. I've got 8 meetings. I've got all this. I've got all this. There's no way I can do it all. One thing at a time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to you, Win, and I will fully credit you and credit the intelligence of the universe coursing through you in that moment, as opposed to me, with this topic of stressless success, which I think, wow, that sounds awesome. And I could imagine a lot of our audience is like my wife, who said, stressless success, that's not possible. What's your view on that? And I'll share my view on it.
Well, 2 things. And when you and I were mulling over, first of all, what do we want to talk about as we experiment with this new tool called LinkedIn Live?
Mm-hmm.
And hello to Greg, hello to Trish, hello to David. Some people I've not seen in a really long time, and I've got some good stories about some of the people who've just popped up.
That's for later in the call, right?
Yeah, in case they get stressed out, not in this call. But to that point, right? So here's what I wish everyone knew. Where you were just pointing now is that stress is something that's caused in the mind of human beings.
Yeah.
It's the feeling of what's being caused in here, not coming from all the things that we've got to do in life, that we think we have to do in life. It's all to do with, in that moment at 7:05 to 7:07, I'd stacked up all the things I had to do into right now. And I was feeling all of those things, when of course, in reality, I would do them one at a time. Now, that's one example. That's often called overwhelm as well, what I just described. But the effects are the same. The effects are the trick of my mind, and not the most pleasant of tricks either. And the second thing is, going back to the second word in stress-free success, that often I've heard people think or say to me that success comes from being stressed.
Right.
When I'm under pressure and stress, it causes me to perform better. And I'm delighted to say that that's bunkum. Bunkum's a very polite word compared to what I would have said otherwise.
We can fill it in. We can fill it in.
Yeah. And what do you see about those 2 words combined as we discuss them this afternoon or this morning, depending on where we are in the world?
Well, first I'll share a story. My last boss in the corporate world, I remember having a conversation with him one time, and he said to me, Jeff, you're so calm. How do you ever get anything done? And I said to him, you're so stressed. How do you ever get anything done? And it's to that point, right, that there is this idea that, and I got a note from someone in advance of this call that there's this, he was so glad that we were going to talk about this idea, because he had been trying to figure out how to have the optimal level of stress. So we don't want to be overwhelmed, but there's this idea that if we don't have any stress, that somehow we're going to, and I've literally heard this from clients, we're going to sit on the sofa and eat bonbons all day. That we're just going to kind of collapse into this pile of inactivity, and nothing ever is going to happen. And so that's one thought, one observation, and my experience is, I think people confuse stress and focus. I think you can be focused without being stressed. I think you can feel energized without necessarily feeling stressed. So I'm not sure that any level of stress is necessary. And for me, the less stress, the better. Like right at the beginning of this call, when we were figuring out the tech, I had some thoughts in my mind. I was like, what if we don't get on time? What, you know? And then I knew 5 minutes into the call it'd be fine, and that's what happened. Probably less than 5 minutes. I think the other thought is to take it a little bit more upstream from where you went. So there's the words. What does stressless mean? What does success mean? What do those things mean combined? And then there's our capacity to create meaning for the words. And what this, the reason that you resonated with George Pransky and I resonated with Jack Pransky, and we both spend time with Michael Neal, and is they're continuously pointing at the fact that we have this innate capacity to settle. We have this innate capacity to figure things out. And it shows up if we get out of the way. And furthermore, when my client asks me, well, how do I get out of the way? You don't really need to do anything for that either. The thing that I find is most helpful, though, is to really get that your experience of the world is 100% internally generated and can be no other way. And so that stressful thought, that list of 12 things, you made that up, and then you experienced it as real and got stressed about it. And my time to do that is at 4 a.m. when I make up all kinds of potentially catastrophic futures and pretend they're real and get scared of them for a while.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow, you're better at that than me then. You're 3 hours ahead.
I get it out of the way. Never shows up again. No, it's not true.
Yeah. Well, you know what came to mind as you were sharing that, and I'm glad you pointed out as well about the meaning in the words, that we put meaning on the words.
Yeah.
I would have a different meaning to the word stress than you would, and everyone else on the call. And hi, Cleaner, good to have you
and
here.
Success too, Win. That's
right,
a trap
every
also.
word.
We're totally making that up.
Right. But here's where I was going with that, is that that word success is that I've noticed, and me too to this, that I thought that the most successful and best performer of me came when I had more on my mind, not less.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where it hit home for me back, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago now. And I was delivering training in a company over 4 days. Monday to Thursday. And the first 3 days, we had a large group. It was about 22, 23 people in the center of London. And they came from all over Western and Central Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And their job was to then take the best practice from what we were discussing in this company to take into their own markets, which was then everywhere in Europe, including Eastern Europe. In fact, it everywhere across to everywhere, I think, north of India, but across to the Pacific coast of Asia. And on the 4th day, there was a group of 8 people left who were, not because we got rid of everyone else, but these 8 were chosen because they would be delivering the training to the other people in those individual markets. And there was about 2,500 people that those 8 people will then go and train. And one of the guys said to me, I don't know, maybe an hour into that day of Train the Trainer, he said, Win, I don't know how you do this. How do you keep all of these things in your head? And he listed all of these things about who said what, when, where they
Yeah.
sat, where the flip charts were, how far back what you wrote was on Tuesday afternoon, um, what who said what in this bit when we discussed something on Wednesday morning. And I said to him, listen, none of that is in my mind. And the reason I'm able to remember is because none of that is in my mind.
Right.
And literally, I said, the best of me at any moment in doing any job or any human endeavor is me being present to the task, not present to my psychology.
I think that's such a great point, and I'm focusing on the word remember, which literally means to recreate. And so scientists used to think that our if you looked inside our brain, it looked like a little filing cabinet in there, or the biological equivalent of a filing cabinet, that specific memories were in specific places. But what they've learned now is that we actually recreate a memory in the present moment. And as you discovered, and as I have discovered, um, it's a lot easier to do that if our minds are relatively blank. I was um, I was coaching a guy who was he had been a chief medical officer at a large health system, and he had had a disagreement with the CEO, and they had parted ways, and he was looking for his next thing. And I kind of came in the middle of this, and he was preparing for some interviews, and I asked him to describe, well, what's your process of preparing? And it was almost it sounded like the way political candidates prepare for a debate, right? It was like, these are so these are my 5 key values. These are the top 25 questions that I would anticipate these people could ask me. These are the memorized responses that I have for each. And it would take him like 2 days to prepare. And I got him to agree to try an experiment. And the experiment was, this is someone who'd been doing what he does for 30 years. He was in his late 50s. I think he actually turned 60 while we were working together. He'd done all the work. And so there was one particular job that he wasn't all that excited about, but he decided to interview for it anyway. And I said, look, you're not a good fit for this job. Even if they offered it to you, you wouldn't take it. Let's try something. And I had him not prepare for that. And it was really hard for him not to prepare. I said, I want you to listen to the questions. I want you to, give yourself a second or two. It's not like it's going to instantaneously pop into your mind the perfectly canned response, but just see what happens. And he came back after our next session after the interview, and he said that was the best interview I ever had. Like, I felt like I was actually having a real conversation and learning about them, and they were learning about me, instead of being in some kind of performance where I was simultaneously reciting my lines and worried about how I was reciting my lines. And I think that kind of availability, that kind of presence, is what's available. Call it whatever you want.
And I loved what you just shared. And always available regardless of what's going on.
Yeah.
Regardless of what's going on. So there are a few people with us right now who have just said hi. And either they directly or their teams have been on training with me, such, sales, negotiation, leadership, presentation skills.
Yeah.
And often we have a story of Well, when I'm presenting, but it's someone senior within my own business, or my boss, or someone senior in my client base, that's the cause of me getting stressed.
Mm-hmm.
That's the cause of me no longer being present to the task at hand, but focusing on my psychology, focusing on this, as opposed to focusing on out there. Because, as a presentation is always about the audience, a negotiation is always about the agreement. Sales is always about reaching something that's going to be incredibly powerful for the customer. It's never about us.
Yeah.
And yet what we do is, and there's just a few people have just been mentioning here, Kashiana and Kevin, we overthink
Mm-hmm.
innocently, not by, oh, this is a smart thing to do. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to overthink now. This will be awesome. Or I'm going to get myself really tense. It's not done purposefully, but it's a
Right.
natural byproduct of the trick of the mind, that it looks like the outside world is the cause of how I feel inside.
Right.
And exactly to what you just said is that what's always available is to see through that. And it's always available for us at some stage, which we always do, regardless of how well we overthink. At some point, we always settle down again.
Yeah. And sometimes we catch ourselves 3 days from now, and sometimes we catch ourselves in 5 minutes, and sometimes we catch ourselves as we're doing it. And I think the more we look into this, where is our next thought coming from, and is it helpful?
Mm,
I think the reason we stress out is somewhere along the line. I know I learned this from my mother. Um, I mean, even at 86, she has overwhelming anxiety, and it's like the only thing she feels like she can do about something is worry about it, and somehow it appears to be useful. And I'm not sure why. I think there's, what's the Skinner, like, reinforcement schedules, and so, like, the reinforcement schedules that stay, that are trickiest to drop, are the intermittent ones. So it worrying looks like it works just often enough that we're totally addicted to it,
mm,
because we don't understand that we're actually not worrying about something that's real. We're worrying about something that we just thought and believed it to be real.
mm. I remember vividly on a train into London, and it's just over an hour
Mm-hmm.
train into where I live, center of London. And I had an afternoon meeting, and in the early afternoon, I took the train in. And I wisely didn't have my iPad with something downloaded for me to watch or something on my phone to listen to. I wanted to just quieten down from the inside. And it was really smart in my mind because I'd been really busy and I thought that this is an hour for me to relax. Except I didn't, because if I'd have had the iPad there with an episode of a TV show or half a movie I could watch in that hour, I wouldn't have really been watching it because I was really busy in my own head.
Yeah.
And here's what I noticed in that time. I noticed I was worrying, and then I went, "Oh, I've been worrying for 10 minutes. Oh, might not be a smart thing to do. Gaze out the window."
Mm-hmm.
And I daydreamed for 10 minutes. Well, actually, probably more like 2 minutes. I daydreamed for 2 minutes. And then I had this other thought, oh, that's so frivolous, Win. Go back to worrying. That's helpful. And I went, what the heck was that? That
Yeah.
is absolute nonsense. Why would I think that's true? Now, to me, I don't think there's any different in the real life effects of after I arrived at my destination, whether I'd spent that entire hour worrying or whether I'd spent that time daydreaming, because that hour would have gone.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know I'd rather have an hour of a pleasant daydream than living in a nightmare. I'd rather that than, having a nightmare while my eyes happen to be awake on that train.
Yeah.
But I also know that had nothing to do with that meeting that I would have half an hour after I got into London. It had nothing to do with it. But for some reason, I noticed, well, I saw that I was in the trap of thinking that worry was noble, daydream
Hmm.
was frivolous. And I'm really glad I caught myself in that space of going, wait a minute, there's a really cool underlying nonsensical belief that I'd had. And I went, I'm really glad I've seen that because that just is not true.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that
since,
raised. Go
no,
ahead.
sorry.
Go ahead. Well, it raises an interesting question for me, which is, um, we've made up all these rules, right? One of the rules we've made up is that we need to prepare. If we're going to have a meeting, we need to prepare. Well, what's the best way to prepare? Is the best way to prepare to frantically go over all our notes and try to remember everything? Is the best way to prepare stare out the window and trust that we will have access to the information we need when we need it?
Yeah. And we have to see that for ourselves.
Yeah. It's one thing to hear, you
Yeah.
from the UK and me from Colorado lecture about um,
Yeah.
this. It does. You do. You're exactly right. And so I'm curious, and to that end, and I want to recognize that we do have a little bit of delay in terms of how quickly we see the comments. But I'm wondering what comes up for people when you hear us talking about this, when you hear us pointing at this possibility. How has it shown up for you? And when, if you want to fill in while we're waiting for any kind of comments, I don't know if there's.
Well, you could
I
name a tune and I'll hum. How about that for free?
We can have the da, 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 the Jeopardy music while we're waiting for the final answers from
Yeah,
people.
which people from your side of the Atlantic would know what that was, and over here, with no idea.
Yeah, I'm surprised you don't have reruns of Jeopardy. The Brits are so much smarter than us in the States. I would think it'd be a big hit over there.
Never made it here.
Yeah. Do you even know what I'm talking about at all?
I do because of all the
Yeah.
time I've spent there. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing that I was going to say a few minutes ago is that I mean, I enjoy preparing.
Hmm.
And sometimes preparing is a really good, and Kevin's mentioning about this right now. He's saying having a
Yeah.
plan and basic prep is one of the tools I use to manage stress. Yeah. Now, at where were we? Oh, half an hour before we were meant to start today, okay, I had my
Yeah.
notepad out and I
Yeah.
went, I want to write down all my meetings tomorrow because I do not want to have to think about it again. And if I've written it down, I know I never have to have that on my mind. So
Yeah.
it's a way of me getting that stuff out of my head and knowing I am now able to be present to this conversation. I'm able to no longer have to think about that until my alarm goes off tomorrow at 5:50 a.m. End of story. I never have to think of that again.
Well, and one
So
of the things, yeah, yeah, just to add on to that, and maybe a slightly different angle on it, is I've done this for myself, and I've done this with clients. I have an app on my watch called Just Press Record, where if I have a thought that I want to capture, I just, I look like a dork doing it, but I just talking to my watch, and I know I have it, and so I don't have to worry about what was that thing, because thoughts pop up at the weirdest moments, right? They don't always, they might pop up on a run, or when I'm at the grocery store, or sometime when I'm not otherwise able to capture it at my desk or in some other way. And that's one of the things that I do to just like, okay, it's in there. I keep an electronic calendar, so I generally don't have to worry about that.
hmm,
Um, but yeah, that gets into the realm of like, there's this interesting in between space, right, where um, we're not saying tools aren't helpful, but at the same time, people get really confused about what is what stress actually is, and whether it's more effective to manage it or just see it as thoughts that will pass if we let them.
Yeah, and another way of saying it would be even deeper potentially would be with, and even if we are stressed, there's no need to be stressed about being stressed either, because that would be one way of overthinking an
Right.
emotion.
Yeah,
Um,
and I'm just someone just yeah, it was Kevin. Do we really ever overthink? Or are we just innocently forgetting that we're thinking? I think you're onto something there. I mean, all of these things are concepts that we're making up and looking at and arguing about, right? So overthinking, like I don't even know what that is, but I know that different people have different opinions about it, whether or not it's possible.
yeah,
And to me, it's the when I look at that, it's like, oh, I think Kevin, this is where you were going. We don't really need to worry about overthinking.
because that would be overthinking about overthinking.
Yeah, I mean that falls away too.
Yeah.
It doesn't survive scrutiny.
No, it doesn't. And to that point, I think when we scrutinize, that gives us more of what we're looking to get less of,
Right.
as is self-judgment, giving myself a hard time. Yeah, I shouldn't do this. I should know better than this. Oh my Lord,
Yeah.
what am I doing? Well, that just adds to the weight of it.
Yeah.
And I think we've got quite a lot of really good questions and comments here. Should we just go through a
Yeah.
couple?
Well, I'm looking at Kelly's. So hi, Kelly. It's been a long time. Um, I that I think maybe you'd like to say something about that when because we talked about it when we were talking about this call that preparation slash planning helps reduce the stress. And I
Yeah.
think you had an interesting take on that.
Well, I know for me, so what I described earlier on in my, I'm going to list out all my meetings tomorrow so I never have to think about it again. That's
Yeah.
me soothing myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to me, there's times when that's a really smart idea. And to me, I know that that was helpful earlier on, but it's no
Hmm.
more than, hey, jasmine tea, really good for you.
Yeah.
Well, I like jasmine tea. Sometimes I drink coffee, sometimes I drink water. It doesn't mean that this is the prescription jasmine
Right.
tea in this mug that
Right.
that we've got.
And that shirt and right the
Yeah,
whole yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Now, done to an nth degree, okay? This is a true story about me, and David Louis would actually testify to this is the kind of thing that he and I might have talked about in the past. I used to have lucky boxer shorts. I kid you not, right? And this was well into my 20s. I was 22 and I still had these lucky boxer shorts. And I wore these lucky boxer shorts when my City of Swansea's rugby team were playing Australia in a rugby game.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
wore them on this damp November day. The weather was damp, not me. Okay. The underwear was clean and it was freshly laundered. And I was playing pool in the pub before the game, and I had the perfect game where I broke and the other player didn't have a shot. And I thought that's happened twice in my life. Boxer shorts, right? I
Yeah,
then went
definitely.
to the game. Went to the game. 15 men wearing white from my city against 15 men wearing gold of Australia, and Australia were the world champions of international rugby at the time. My team won because I was wearing boxer shorts and I wasn't even on the field. Right? That's it to the nth degree of how.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that's the same, but it's of a similar ilk that we
Yeah.
make up rules and kind of, I don't know, routines that we think is the cause of something in the future. And to your point, we're not saying planning and preparation or any tools aren't helpful,
Hmm.
but it's knowing that to what I've seen more and more is that my ability to remember, as you said, to recreate and think right now what would be most helpful for me right now is
Hmm.
always available. And the bit that I like to know, and I'm going to probably continue seeing hopefully more and more about this to the day I die, is that I'd love to keep moving in the direction of being relaxed. which
Yeah.
is not being asleep on the job, because that's not
Right.
relaxed, that's being asleep.
Right.
And knowing that I can be absolutely focused, and in fact, focus and presence are one way of saying the same thing, but what are we focusing on? Focusing here, one thing. And anything that's going on that I'm paying attention to in my mind gets in its way.
Yeah.
And I don't want to have to think about trying to get me relaxed, trying to get me to have a good night's sleep, trying to get me to not be stressed, trying to get me to not overthink. I just really love the feeling of that,
Yeah.
and the knot in my stomach easing, and knowing
Right.
that that is the best of me. Anyway, I've said a lot there quite quickly, Jeff.
Well, what I'm noticing in myself is that even that, like I agree with you 100% that I feel like I'm doing better when I'm relaxed. I feel like I'm doing better when I feel present. And at the same time, if I notice I'm not relaxed, there really isn't anything to do about it. Like I can, and I heard Michael talking about this in a coaching session the other day, that if that were really a requirement, then sometimes your best meeting, your best coaching session, your best pitch, your best whatever happens when you objectively would say, I wasn't at my best. So it's not I mean, it feels better, but it's not actually a requirement. And I think, when you were talking about overthinking, we can actually do that with relaxing and stress too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's a great point, because I know there have been times where I've thought, "Oh, I'm really on it today. I'm on fire." And then the next second, I've sucked at something
Yeah.
because I'm thinking about how good I am, not
Right.
about what I'm doing.
I'm so present right now. It's like, not if you're thinking about how present you are.
Right. Yeah, it's the same, right? It's the same as
Yeah.
the fun I have when I'm training listening. And whenever we've noticed, whenever I've noticed, "Oh, no, I've not been listening," and then I give myself, "Oh, geez, I need to get better at listening right now." And in the moment I'm saying that to myself, I've doubled down on how little I'm listening. So
Yeah.
it's notice and release
Yeah.
as opposed to notice and judge.
Right.
Or what you said, which I think was really cool, is notice and knowing there's nothing to do about it.
Yeah. And I do think it's certainly not our natural tendency. It's not mine.
Well, I learned that here's my opinion on me.
Hmm.
I learned that I thought the best of me was to do something about how I was doing,
Hmm.
as opposed to what I'm getting an inkling on over the years, a little by little. Every couple of years, I'm seeing more about this. Is that what you were hinting at earlier on? Is the showing up at me at 7:07 on Monday morning, 11 days ago, when all of that overthinking just went.
Hmm.
I just saw, oh yeah. Now
Yeah.
that capacity and the capacity for me to see for myself, wait a minute, I've got a story that worrying is more helpful than pipe dreams and daydreaming. What's that about? The noticing in real time that I've had so little respect for, and yet it's always been in my favor. Or some
Right.
people we'd call that wisdom, the still
Yeah.
voice within. If you're religious, you might call that the God inside. That
Yeah.
is, to me, what I've noticed is inherent in everyone, absolutely inherent in everyone. And we learn and move away from it for many different reasons. And it's nice to get rekindled into the fact that, wait a minute, I'm made really well without me having to get involved. I never have to tell myself to breathe out after breathing in. Never have to do that. Never have to tell my kidneys, hey, do a good job today, right? And will them to do a better job at cleaning my blood. I never have to do that, nor have a conversation with my bone marrow to produce better and more red blood cells. I never need to get involved in that. And that is far more miraculous than anything I will ever do in this physical world, in my opinion. And all of those things are happening at the same time without me having a darn thing to do with it.
Yeah, it's amazing how many things happen of their own accord if we just get out of the way. If we kind of give up the idea that we're responsible for them. And I think I'm going to use the word work. Maybe it's, I don't know what the right word is, investigation, curiosity, something along those lines, is just noticing how much things take care of themselves if I don't get it. If I, Jeff, the voice in my head, doesn't get in the way.
It's a really profound thing to notice. And again, going back to something that we mentioned a few minutes earlier, we have to see that for ourselves. You've seen that for yourself. I've seen it for myself. And it's, a fundamental part of the work that we do.
Yeah.
But also, in my mind, what I think can be really helpful is for us to notice what is innate and natural in human beings and what is helpful for us to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And in my mind, I've noticed, and I've been a part of this too, that I used to train being better at things that are innate abilities in humans.
Yeah.
Listening being one,
Yeah.
being curious is another, being
Mm-hmm.
present is another. So in my mind, we do better by subtraction, not addition there. It's taking away the things that we were born with as opposed to adding in.
Another one of my favorites, Win, is and we saw this at the beginning of COVID. Uh, I got asked to do a training on resilience. How can we be more resilient? And I actually did the training, but it was all about how you're innately resilient. You don't have to do anything to be resilient because you have the capacity to think new thoughts, and that's all resilience is, oh, I should do this, or oh, I'm actually okay.
Yeah.
And so many of those things that you were talking about, whether it's creativity or connection, communication, listening, resilience, they're innate capacities that we have.
And if you're listening to this, questioning what Jeff said about resilience, the one way that I like to notice this is that, and I've heard a lot of us as humans say this, well, I have these bad feelings and bad memories that keep coming back. Yeah, and if they keep coming back, they must have gone. Nothing,
Mm,
nothing that's gone can come. Nothing that hasn't gone can come back. But here's what we do. We create a story about a feeling or a memory coming back without noticing the other half of it, which is it must have already gone. Why don't we just pay a bit of respect to the other side of the coin too? Which is we're in, as human beings, a range of emotions that go up and down, a range of different thinking that goes up and down, and quantity, speed, how real it looks, how unreal it looks. That's just true for humans. But it doesn't mean anything personal about our resilience if we have a bad feeling that keeps coming back. It doesn't mean that. It just means we have a bad feeling that comes back.
Right.
The bad feeling that must have gone beforehand.
And that we don't feel bad when the thought isn't there.
Right.
Yeah.
And when it's not there, how do we feel? Great. Well, what does that show? Oh, we bounce back.
And it shows that we're feeling our thinking, not reality. If it really were reality, it would be there all the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one way of making that distinction really, really clear would be anything in my past. If it was my past that's causing me to feel bad, my past is always my past. And if
Yeah.
it was that was the cause, it would be constant, to your point, and it can't be.
Well, and that's the beautiful thing, Win, because that is so hopeful. Like if I really was defined by my past, I'm totally stuck. But because I have to recreate it with thinking, and because I have the capacity to think new things, I'm not imprisoned by anything that is in the past. There's always something new available. There's always a different way of seeing it or seeing something totally different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we have strayed quite far from this original topic of stress, but I do think it's all related. It's all part of this fundamental insight that we're experiencing, we're feeling, our thinking, and then our thinking changes.
Yeah.
I'm curious if there are any other. We haven't had any comments in a while, and I don't know if we've just
Well, there was
gone off
one
the
more.
deep end, or I want to check in and see what's coming up for folks.
Yeah.
Was there something you wanted to respond to in the comments?
And as you out there are typing in whatever questions you have, it's Kevin Phillips. We have two Kevins here.
I thought they were the same Kevin. Wow.
No, there's a Kevin K in your time zone and there's a Kevin Phillips in my time zone.
Ah, okay.
So a little thinking and planning. All plans fall apart at first contact, etc. So best to do something, then measure, plan, do again. It's the classic wise thing in business. And I'm going to put wise in air quotes, inverted commas here. Now, in my mind, I think being learning creatures and learn by iterations, I think that's just how we are, without us having to put a process in place for us to learn and do better. I think we do that without needing to be on ourselves. It wasn't long ago that I would train managers that here's what every person who works for you needs to know. What's expected, how are they doing, and what can they do to improve? Now, there's a part of that I still would agree with. But being on them, or me being on myself, with me thinking about what's expected, how am I doing, what can I do to improve, that's just me living in my head, and that's not me being at my best and expressing and learning and being creative and being present to what is, as opposed to what I think should be.
Right.
And to me, me being on myself was a big part of me being either, tight, depressed, anxious, neurotic, worried, insomnia. All of those things were because of how much of my thinking was about how am I doing in life.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, self-flagellation seemed so helpful for so long. Like if I would just beat myself up and make myself feel bad about stuff enough, I would do something, or at least that's the thought process.
Yeah.
But the truth is, if I really didn't want to do something, there was no amount of beating myself up about it that would actually help. So then it's well, why don't I want to do that? And what do I really want to do instead? And that's a lot more fun.
A lot more fun. And going back to something that you said earlier on that Cleaner mentioned in the comments as well, and she acknowledged this to say, yeah, we don't have to be stressed in order to act,
Yeah.
or or motivation is not a requirement to act. We think it is when we're lacking in it. There is such a thing as inspired action that requires absolutely nothing but one thought.
Hmm.
Oh, I'll do this. Oh, this looks interesting. Oh, I'll ask this question. Oh, it's tea now, not coffee.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'll write down my list of things to do tomorrow so I can not have to worry about it again.
And
Nice.
and I think that, yeah, I think this is where the planning part comes in, because sometimes you do need to plan. Like sometimes there's a particular, if you're in a business meeting and what you're talking about is the capabilities of your software solution, like there's information you need to present, and you need to present it in an order that makes sense. And so that kind of outer world preparation, makes sense to me. The part that doesn't make sense is thinking that it's helpful to, okay, I've got to smile, I've got to connect with these people. I haven't met them before. Got to make a good I've got to make a good impression. I've got to be present. I've got to be all this, right? Like all of that stuff is taking you away from it. If you want to write, yeah, I've got 5 points I want to make, and I've just got them jotted down on an index card to remind me. That makes total sense.
Yeah, absolutely does. At some stage, even outside of the business, although the parallels are the same, if I'm about to go on a trip,
Hmm.
as I will again in, what was it, next one's about 3 or 4 weeks' time, then, well, I need to pack
Yeah.
before I go.
Yeah.
I need to have booked my taxi to then arrive at the airport in enough time for me to not miss the flight. You watch now, I'll miss this one because I've said that. I've said it won't happen, right? But
You just got
we're
to wear
not.
your lucky shorts and you'll be fine.
Yeah, given the fact that that was 30 years ago, funnily enough, they are somewhere else now. They're not in my either laundry basket or in my clean underwear drawer. It's not there. But here's the point. This is not about do not prepare, do not plan. This is not saying that at all. Is that we are wiser than we give ourselves credit for without needing totems for success or totems to feel good,
Yeah.
or the misconception that I do better under stress. There's a right point of tension in order for me to do a good job. Yeah, it's an interesting idea and not true.
Right. Right. So I'm noticing we just have a couple minutes left, and the planning side of me would like to end on time. So I'm
Yeah,
wondering, and we didn't, I want to congratulate ourselves because we did very little in the way of planning on this.
and I
But
did
we
less.
didn't talk about how to close, and like how do people reach you? And people can reach me at jeff@jmun.com. They can reach out to me on LinkedIn. How do
Yeah.
people, if they want to continue this conversation with you, what's the best way to reach you?
Well, it would be the same as you, but just with different names, right? Because the great thing is,
Yeah.
if you're here for this event, you know how to get hold of Jeff on LinkedIn, how to get hold of me, Win, on LinkedIn. It's a very easy thing to do.
Yeah.
And to me, anyone who knows me or doesn't, whoever wants to have a chat, I'm always up for a chat.
Yeah. Me too.
Yeah. And if you want us to do this again and anything that
Yeah.
you want us, just get in touch with us.
A
Maybe a topic that
topic.
you'd like to
Yeah.
talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Fantastic.
it's been really lovely to have you all here. Jeff, thanks very much for putting all this together. I was saying just now, the little that you think you've done, I've done even less because you took charge of all of the technical things because it was just like, well, it was Jeff's idea. I'll let him deal with all that stuff. I'll just turn up.
Well, it was an opportunity to learn about something in the outside world that I didn't know about before, and that part was fun.
Yeah.
Um, and I loved the conversation. When it's always a thrill to talk with you and just to kind of settle into that exploration with you. And if others enjoyed it even half as much as I did, I'll consider the whole thing a win, and no pun intended. And of course, the recording will be available for people who missed it. So hopefully people will take a look at the recording as well.
Oh no, I'm in my head now. This has been recorded. I thought it was a one hit.
It's forever, Win. Glad I didn't tell you that up front.
Yeah, I'd have really been
We would have
worried.
been so stressed out about it.
You always knew and hit it. That's really wise of you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff. It's been an absolute pleasure. So great to chat with you as always.
Thank you, Win. Take care, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Goodbye.